Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here today. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Andrew Shane. I use he, him pronouns. I am the Managing Director of Public Policy for GRACE and End Child Poverty California. We are so glad to see all of you, to be surrounded by members and staff and community members and advocate stakeholders here for this important discussion. A very quick appreciation to the Senate Democratic Caucus for filming this event, to the facility staff, and to everyone on Senator Skinner's team who made this possible, as well as the GRACE and EPIC teams. We're proud to co-sponsor this event with End Poverty in California. We are gathered here today to build on the work and inject new energy into lifting children and families out of poverty. I know I still remember that chilly press event so many years ago, and think about all the progress we've made. We couldn't have a better leader to open this discussion than Senator Nancy Skinner. Senator Skinner, I think it goes without saying, but for those who may not know your impact, which probably isn't anyone in this room, we at GRACE consider you one of the most effective state legislators of all time. Thank you for your service. Woo! That's right. Just two of the achievements that I personally and GRACE couldn't be prouder to be a part of include school meals for all. From California as the first state in the nation to the #1 policy priority in the White House strategy to end hunger in America. Just fantastic trailblazing leadership. And hope accounts. Senator, I actually haven't told you this, but we recently talked to the Washington advocates who were gushing at what has been achieved here already as they work through their own work group process and are looking to be catching up. You know, we always say West Coast, best coast. So we wish them well. We know there's more to do to fulfill your vision of baby bonds for all California children born into low-income families. And many of these took time. We know that you have always planted seeds that you've nurtured into these transformative major policy wins and through implementation, a powerful model for us all to think about. So as a constituent, as an advocate, and as a Californian, I give you, Senator Nancy Skinner, your Women's Caucus Chair, your Senate Budget Chair. Thank you so much for being here today.
Very happy to be here, and thank you so much for that kind introduction. I appreciate it. And I appreciate that I have been able to be effective, because being able to be effective allows, I ran for office so I could deliver the kinds of things that we've all been able to deliver, and so I could partner with groups and organizations like End Poverty Now and Children's Poverty Now and Lift and so many more. And fortunately, our state capitol has a huge array of very effective coalitions fighting on so many social justice and economic justice issues, and who are effective. And so I'm able, I figure, okay, channel through me, right? You do your work, and then I'll do my work to try to get it across the finish line. And I was also, of course, very honored to be able to be named the budget chair for the state Senate budget. And being in that role, clearly, as budget chair, I can't do it alone. My colleagues have to support it. The assembly has to be supportive. And of course, your good work is what enables that. And we had such phenomenal wins last year. So let me just quickly reference a few of them. We were able to meet 11 out of 14 of the End Child Poverty priorities for 2022. So $100 million was secured to improve child care infrastructure. We extended the $1 billion investment in new child care slots and increasing child care program access. We provided new funding to increase rates for the child care providers, and $354 million for child care stipends. We waived the family fees for another year. We were able to increase the grant to our CalWORKs families by 21%. Yes. And we ended the state's practice of intercepting child support payments from families on CalWORKs. Huge win. as we know, when you are living, when you're on that margin and you have so little per month to live on, every dollar counts. And for a lot of folks who have not had to face that, they don't necessarily appreciate when we present to them, like this $50, real, and yet you all come forward and you bring people forward to give that living experience, to make it real for people. And it works, and we've been able to achieve these. We also, this is something I was fighting for a long time, we finally got the SSI grant up, 39 more per individuals and 100 more per couples. And some people might hear that and they think $39, so what? But as we know, if you're living on SSI, 39 is significant. We'd like it to be higher, but we still managed. Then we provided designated 9.5 billion in direct tax refunds to families. That's 350 per filer plus additional 350 if they have dependents for families with incomes below 75,000. 12 million to support the Promised Neighborhoods and the foster youth tax credit. And then, of course, another big victory that we had was the establishment of the HOPE accounts. And these HOPE accounts, right now, we have designated them for our children who lost their parent or caregiver due to COVID, and for our foster youth. But really, we're hoping over time, and while I may not be here in 4 to 5 years, actually in 3 years, but anyway, others can keep it going. We're in a shortfall budgetarily right now, but the economy changes. And so we've begun something that's so important. And those HOPE grants are the beginnings. We also, of course, had the pilot program on the basic income support. So with these kinds of things starting to create an infrastructure in California, then we have the opportunity to expand over time. And of course, our HOPE accounts, that was sponsored by Grace and End Child Poverty. So thank you so much for that work on that. So we know that we've had great victories, but we also know there's still a lot more to do. Inflation hit, rents are going up. So we have, we've worked so hard, and we have done a lot to help our families most in need and our children, and yet the pressures are increasing on them. So I know you're dedicated and committed to continuing to figure out what more we need to do, what tweaks we need to do, and to make sure that all of my colleagues understand just the stress of living on the edge like that, of that poverty, and how that affects your health, how it affects the outcomes of children's education. They can go to the best school, but if they have that kind of stress of being in poverty, of not knowing where their next meal is, not knowing whether they have a car, their car works, and I mean their families, and on and on. And so we know that you bring those families' lived experiences right to my colleagues so they really understand, and that we always make it a priority, even in a shortfall, that when we do not balance our budget on the backs of our people most in need. So I'm so, again, proud that you exist and that we have been such great partners. I commit to continue to being your partner, and I see my great colleague, Dr. Arambula here, and others, and yes, and Senator Cortese, thank you. I couldn't quite see Senator Cortese's, but yes, you have other great champions in the legislature, and I know you will continue to develop more so that we have all of the legislature as champions for these issues. And thank you so much.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Shamika Gaskins, President and CEO at Grace in Child Poverty, California, here along with my colleague.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. My name is Devin Graham, the president of End Poverty in California, or EPIC for short. I'm really excited to be talking to Gia Jones of Parent Voices today.
Yes. Welcome. Come on, Gia.
Hello, everyone. I just want to say thank you to Parent Voices California, EPIC, and In Child Poverty California, Senator Nancy Skinner, for having me and allowing me to speak in this space. My name is Gia Jones, and I'm a mom of 4, a teen daughter, twin sons, and a baby girl. I work as an advocacy writer at Parent Voices California, In Poverty in California, and as a parent leader. I have a multifaceted experience within the child care industry as a child care family specialist, an advocate, and a parent. I just want to say thank you. Excuse me. This is very important for me as a mom of 4. I understand the in-depth implications of how social issues, access, and the lack thereof of services impact families throughout California. And due to my particular experiences and lens as a trained therapist, I lend my voice to acknowledge this ever-changing system, to emphasize the importance of self-care for families and children post-pandemic. Many families such as mine continue to find great support in affordable and quality childcare, focus groups, public policy development, platforms to ensure our beautiful families are thriving. Post-pandemic, it's important for public policymakers to consider the continuous efforts to honor the value placed on childcare, children, and family services. I just want to highlight some of the great work of SB 464, the Food Assistance Program from Nourish, California, and also promoting healthy spaces platforms that embrace diversity, inclusivity, and family-oriented services. Also, I think it's very important that we place special attention to destigmatizing the access and seeking of mental health support for individuals, children, and families. And that's special attention to AB 2416, and also, just to highlight some of the previous comments about the family fees and increasing slots for childcare. Because of my, my care for people, I just am wanting to, say thank you for making these particular changes in legislation, and that I just want to highlight those particular bills that are special, or also or highlight certain things that impact me as a mom in the Bay Area. And so I just wanted to say post-pandemic is important for public policy makers to, continue to pay attention to these efforts for families and making sure that they're thriving. So.
Thank
Yeah.
you so much, Gia. We had a couple, I think Devin had a couple
sorry.
questions for you. We are so appreciative of you being here today and the work that you do with Parent Voices and your writing and your advocacy. And we were talking earlier about how this has been a real journey for you. And I think we just would want to hear why is it so important for our policymakers to hear directly from others and the work that you're doing?
I think it's very important because of the ever-changing things that are happening in the system. With advocates such as me and other parent leaders, we're working really hard to really pay attention to certain things that are happening for our own families and for other people in the community. And I really believe that Parent Voices does a very excellent job of paying close attention to things that are happening for families, and we really think it's important for them to thrive and have economic security, food security, all the things that help families to live healthy and create certain healthy spaces for our kids in California.
Thank you so much. Do you have any?
Yeah.
Okay.
And Gia, you know, we've had a chance to learn about your story through the blog that Epic has, where we try to elevate directly impacted voices to do a lot of the narrative change work that's so important. So I just want to say thank you for your contributions to our work at Epic and to Parent Voice for doing everything that you all do, which is just so important. It's a really powerful answer as well. On the point of lived experience and lived expertise, and I think as an organization, we very much view those with lived experience as subject matter experts, far more than anyone in the ivory tower or someone who's at a think tank, even though we love our think tanks, obviously. But I think you all have a lot to offer on that front. Wondering if I could ask you, in line with the idea of having expertise to offer, what does it mean in terms of your day-to-day life to think about policies, whether it's childcare or healthcare or cash aid, that we know can lift children and families out of poverty? What does it mean to you when we have these policy conversations?
It actually means a lot. It helps me to understand that, you know, senators, assembly members, you know, the governor really wants to hear from parents like me, and that my voice really matters, and that it's, I'm sorry, like, yeah, I know. And so it's like, it means a lot, and it continues to help me grow as a parent. It helps me to grow as an individual, helps me to grow as a constituent, and, you know, also, like, I'm doing a current piece regarding there ought to be a law, and speaking with Assembly Member Buffy Wiggs, and how important it is to really be able to talk with the assembly members and really find out what's going on in our communities. And so that's like really important work to really highlight, and want other people to feel excited that their voices can be heard.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gia.
Okay.
Maya?
Yeah.
Thank you again, Gia, and thank you to Parent Voices. It was so wonderful this morning. We got in, and there were parents and children who already got up really early and drove all the way here, and it's just always so humbling to see the support. Again, I'm Shamika Gaskins, president of Grace in Child Poverty, and on behalf of Grace and in Poverty in California, EPIC, I know it's a lot of acronyms, we would like to thank you all, and Nancy Skinner, Dolores Huerta, our legislative leaders who are here today, for joining us. We appreciate our community coming together, especially those who are making the time on a Wednesday afternoon in the Capitol to make your voices heard on critical issues affecting all of Californians, but especially those who are living at or near poverty. We come together today because millions of Californians continue to experience poverty in a state now ranked as the 4th largest economic power in the world. At Grace, we dare to imagine a liberated future free from systemic racism and poverty, in which children, all children, experience a childhood of abundance, dignity, love, and opportunities to thrive. In 2017, we co-sponsored AB 1520 to create a data-driven, comprehensive plan to reduce child and family poverty by 2030. We've convened the Lifting Children and Families Out of Poverty Task Force to write that plan, and since its publication in the late 2018, we have been pushing to the state to take substantive action, and through policies and budgets, to eliminate child and family poverty in California. We don't do this work alone, as you can see in this room. So many of you are here, and the ECPCA Coalition has over 170 organizations working in concert to achieve that liberated future. And over the last 5 years, we've advocated for at least $15 billion in investments in innovative anti-poverty solutions. We know that when legislative leaders prioritize community-driven solutions, progress and change do happen. But we must continue to listen to the voices of our communities, to those who continue to bear the effects of economic oppression, exclusion, racism, and marginalization every day. Uplifting the community-created and community-driven solutions are critical to effective, sustainable solutions to eliminate poverty. Today, we have the power to work towards a future where children and families can truly be lifted out of poverty. Just last year, we saw the historic lows with a decrease in poverty from 16.9% to 11.7%, dropping the rate of poverty by 5 points. But our fight is not done. Today, we hear from community members working to improve our child care system, to ensure children and families have adequate health coverage, access to housing, food, cash to meet their daily needs, opportunities for dignified wages, and that they are not saddled with punitive and unnecessary fines and fees. Today, we acknowledge that some of this work is already underway, but effective leadership and coordinated support from all constituencies is needed to continue the progress. What is more, we need tailored and precise policies that promote a whole child, whole family approach from cradle to career. Over the years, we have partnered with so many legislative champions, seeing you, Dr. Rambla, here, that have shown incredible bravery and dedication to the fight for California for all of us. Together, we have made transformative intergenerational investments. As we heard earlier, Senator Skinner talking about HOPE accounts, but we also, with the leadership of Mia Bonta last year, invested in our promised neighborhoods, and we need to continue to do more to make sure that those sort of community-driven access points are available all across the state. California, time and time again, has set the precedent for the nation, and it's more important than ever that for this legislature to continue the momentum and demonstrate what is possible for the entire nation. A poverty-free state with an abundance of opportunities and a future of endless possibilities. Thank you for being here, and I'm excited to turn it over to my colleague, Devin Gray at EPIC.
Thanks, Shamika. So again, my name is Devin Graham, the president of End Poverty in California, or EPIC for short. That's our acronym. First, just want to say thank you to all of you for being here. It's really an honor to be able to address so many wonderful policymakers and advocates and real heroes in the state who do such tremendous work. I also want to acknowledge my colleague, Patrice Berry, who's our Chief Impact Officer. She's somewhere in the crowd back there. So feel free to say hi to us afterwards. Before introducing some other advocates who are going to take the podium after me, I just wanted to provide a brief overview about what EPIC is, because we're a relatively new organization. We were founded in February of last year by Mayor Michael Tubbs of Stockton, who you might know while being mayor of Stockton, though he's a former mayor now, is a real national leader on guaranteed income, but he also serves currently as a senior advisor to Governor Newsom on economic mobility and opportunity. So we were created in February because, as you all know, the needs to eradicate poverty in the state couldn't be greater. As Shamika was saying, we're the fourth largest economy in the world. We have more billionaires in this state than any other country aside from the United States and China, yet we have the highest rate of poverty in the country when you take into account cost of living. We have 4.5 million Californians living below the poverty line. So the time certainly is now to embrace the possibility that we can end poverty in the state, and that if we can do it anywhere, we can do it here. Want to just go over sort of EPIC's theory of change and how we introduce our work. So it's in three main buckets. The first is the traditional sort of policy advocacy, which we do with organizations like End Child Poverty California, like Parent Voices, like so many others who are going to take the stage, where we work in Sacramento to advance a policy agenda that's focused on anything from increasing access to the safety net to making housing a human right, criminal justice reform, worker empowerment, support for entrepreneurs and small business owners, and the like. The second bucket of work that we do is perhaps our most important work. It's narrative change work. We're believers that we can't change the policies that have held us back until we change the stories that we are told that explain poverty, why people are living in poverty, why poverty is entrenched. So once we change that story to one that has for so many decades and centuries focused on individual failings and flaws, to one that's more recognizing that there are systems and structures that keep poverty entrenched and intergenerational. That's how we change the story. That's the story we need to change. We do that through storytelling, like Gia was talking about earlier, through other things as well. And then our third bucket of work is in our power building efforts through grassroots organizing throughout the state, and particularly in Fresno, so we'll be talking later. And then also our C4 work, which enables us to do some candidate spending and issue spending as well. There are a few opportunities that I want to invite policymakers and advocates alike to join us on. The first is the Select Committee for Poverty and Economic Inclusion that was created by Speaker Rendon when we launched last year in February. It's been chaired by Assemblymember Isaac Bryan. We had our initial hearing in June of last year. We had a rally outside the Capitol that was joined by many of the organizations in this room. We had 200 advocates celebrating the attention that was being paid towards ending poverty in the state, representing 15 organizations. So it was a really big celebration there. We also helped coordinate the testimony to ensure that lived experience was at the center of the policy recommendations, both offering explanations for why people live in poverty and why it's so hard to escape it, but also discussing, more importantly, the solutions of what we can do. The second, just to finish that point, I want to invite every legislator in the room to join the Select Committee when we get it renewed for this coming term, and also want to invite other advocates to continue to contribute to the substance of the testimony that takes place there, both in the Capitol but also in field hearings around the state. The second opportunity I'd like to point out is our listening tour of the state. We were recently featured in the LA Times for the work that we've been doing over the last year, where we're going to every community in the state. We're touring the state. We've been to 8 counties thus far, plan to get to all 58 by the end of 2025, where we simply get folks into a room, people with lived experience, and ask, what does government get wrong about poverty? What can policymakers do to better improve the condition of your lives in the community? And we hear certain things along the road that are remarkably consistent. It's all about access to benefits and the safety net. It's about access to affordable housing. How can we provide support for entrepreneurs and small business owners? Can we get renter protections to keep us from being evicted? And we recently sent our recommendations and learnings from the tour to Governor Newsom, so his team's reviewing that. But I think it's a real opportunity for us as partners to be able to continue to engage in these conversations. And like I said, we're coming to every community in the state, so very eager to partner on that. I know I've only got a minute left, but I just want to leave you with some final thoughts here. I think it's important that as we engage in this work, we begin to internalize the belief that not only is it vitally necessary that we end poverty in the state, but that it's possible. We have all the wealth in the world here. We have all the brilliance in the world. We have the political capital, which might be the hardest thing to accrue, and yet we have it in spades. So this is a matter of making decisions. I think we all recognize that it's policy choices that led us into a predicament of having the highest poverty rate in the country. But it's also policy choices that can get us out of it and make the Golden State golden for all. So with that, I'm going to introduce Chris Haney, the Executive Director of Cal Budget and Policy Center. But thank you all for being here. It really means the world. So I think we're going to have a really substantive discussion here. So Chris, thanks.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Chris Haney. I'm the Executive Director of the California Budget and Policy Center, one of those think tanks that Devin said that he likes, fortunately, and we're honored to be with you here today. We operate at the intersection of policy analysis and policy advocacy, where we try to make the case for policies that will reduce poverty and make outcomes better for low-income Californians, people of color, people who've been disadvantaged or left out of our state's progress because of historic systemic racism, structural blockades, not being allowed to access the benefits that we say are there and that they're eligible for. And we fundamentally believe that all Californians deserve to be able to put food on the table, pay the rent, and meet their basic needs. No one should ever live in poverty. Our state should aspire to be a place where no child or adult struggles to afford their basic needs. And there's proof that this can be a reality, as Devin was just saying. Recent data released by the U.S. Census Bureau shows that poverty, especially for children, significantly dropped nationally and in California in 2021 in the middle of the pandemic. And that's good news. Maybe it's old news for many of the people in this room, but it's unexpected in terms of the effects of the pandemic and the inflation, and the fact that those things are still going on and still very real for millions of Californians. And the answer to how this happened is simple. As Devin was saying, poverty is a policy choice. When we choose to provide the basic supports that families and children need to thrive, it turns out it really works. The evidence is clear that the overall poverty rates and child poverty rates decreased dramatically in California in 2021. The data show that strong public supports played an especially key role in poverty rates that dropped in that year. Those public supports include refundable tax credits like the state and federal earned income tax credit and child tax credits, CalWORKs or TANF at the federal level, SSI, SSP, CalFresh or SNAP at the federal level, and school meals. To combat the uncertainties of the pandemic in our economy, California leaders and federal leaders provided additional emergency support directly to people through these programs during the pandemic, and it made a difference for those families in having the resources they need to pay for food, buy diapers, pay the rent, and meet basic necessities. Just to give you a snapshot of the data, when you look at 2020 to 2021, based on national data, the overall poverty rate in California dropped from 12.3 to 11%. That doesn't seem like a huge drop, but remember what was happening in the pandemic, all the people who lost work, all the people who had to struggle paying the rent because they had lost wages and hours. And for children, there was an even more dramatic dip over that year, from 12.6 to 7.5%, directly attributable to the public supports and the expansions that were put in place. And if you just look at how public supports play into this overall, not just a one-year change, but what would 2021 have looked like if we didn't have all of those public supports in place? For all Californians, the poverty rate on our state would have been 26.2%. Because of the public supports we have in place, that number was only 11%. For children, that poverty rate would have been 25.7%. With the public supports in place, it's 7.5%. And for just to give you a sense of how that breaks down for particular groups, for Latinx children, without the public supports, the poverty rate would be near 34%. With public supports, it's 9.5%. And we know that we'd see similar types of numbers if we looked at other groups across the state: Black, Native American, Pacific Islander, folks with disabilities, et cetera. So what happened? Well, as I was saying, federal refundable tax credit expansions like the child tax credit and boost to a variety of state programs that California state leaders championed, like the folks in this room and Senator Skinner, Golden State stimulus payments, expansion of our own earned income tax credit, expansion of our child tax credit. All of those things helped families make ends meet during a very critical time in our state's history. Unfortunately, the temporary expansion of many of those federal benefits, particularly the child tax credit, has now expired. Many of the efforts that the state put in place have now expired. But we know the evidence is still there, right? If we are able to make these expansions, we reduce poverty, we help people make ends meet. Which brings us here today and why we're here. Yes, the state faces a budget shortfall, but the drivers of that shortfall also mean that conditions are becoming more difficult for the people who access and need these benefits. And so the state faces this paradox. It has to balance a budget under state law, but it also needs to be cognizant of the fact that many people in the state have needs that may increase in the coming year. And so both of these things have to happen together. And the answer of how we get there is that we don't succumb to a scarcity narrative focused only on spending cuts as a way to solve a budget shortfall. We use every tool in the toolbox. This includes maybe using a portion of the state's reserves. And it means we can't forget about the revenue side of the equation. The governor wants to have a conversation about the windfall profits of oil companies. But oil companies aren't the only companies in this state that are experiencing windfall profits amid the pandemic and rising inflation. And we should remember that they only are paying about half of their income in taxes today as they were a generation ago, and that the state gives away $70 billion in tax breaks, deductions, loopholes, credits of various sorts that primarily go to corporations and high-income individuals. So the bottom line, to come back to where I started, is that poverty is a policy choice. I know this personally because my family grew up in poverty, and the $50 a month or $100 a month that many of these benefits provide made a difference. And I'm very honored that I get to be a part of an organization that does its part to try to make the case for expanding these types of programs and services year in and year out. And the bottom line is we have the tools to balance budgets and still make the progress that we need to on reducing poverty. We simply have work to do, and we have to build the political will. So I thank Ending Child Poverty in California and EPIC for the chance to be with you all here today, to our state legislators for being champions, and to everyone who made the trip in here today to make the case for ending poverty in California. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chris, and to the California Budget Policy Center. I am really honored and humbled to introduce our next two speakers who I am excited could make it here today. And so we have Camila Chavez, Executive Director of Dolores Huerta Foundation, who will then be introducing Dolores Huerta. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Shamika. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm honored to be here on behalf of Dolores Huerta Foundation and our Vecinos Unidos, Members United Network. Our organization serves residents in Kern, Tulare, Fresno, and Kings counties, as well as Antelope Valley in Los Angeles County. The DHF, Dolores Huerta Foundation, organizes people to advocate for the improvements that they want to see in their schools and communities. We're working with community members who have been most impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. Families who were facing difficult times prior to the pandemic have been increasingly impacted by the loss of loved ones, loss of employment, education setbacks, food insecurities, and more. 1 in 3 Central Valley families have incomes below the federal poverty level. Poverty rates are even higher for immigrant families and families of color. It's estimated that 1 in 5 children in the Central Valley has at least one undocumented parent, and that nearly 3 in 4 children with an undocumented parent have family incomes that are below 150% of the federal poverty level. The San Joaquin Valley is the economic engine of the state, where agriculture, oil, and land development generate significant wealth. 8 San Joaquin Valley counties are among the top 10 agricultural producers in the state. This multi-billion-dollar industry saw record profits last year. Yet, food insecurity disproportionately affects children, people of color, and rural communities. The farm workers who pick the food, the people who prepare the food and serve the food are the same folks that cannot afford to feed their own families. Children who live in food insecure households have higher rates of developmental delay, anxiety, depression, and have poorer academic performance. Food insecurity, as we know, also contributes to health problems and disease. Many rural residents live in healthcare deserts. Last month, the residents of Madera County lost their only hospital. Where will they seek care? Officials are predicting more hospital closures throughout the state, and while we celebrate increased access to health care, and to low-income Californians especially, what good are those benefits if they don't have access to clinics or hospitals? Education is oftentimes presented as the solution to break the cycle of poverty. For the Central Valley, greater resources need to be given to pre-K all the way through college education. In a state where over 35% of the population has a bachelor's degree or higher, we work in communities with only 3 to 6% of the population have degree attainment. So Central Valley youth are more likely to go to prison than to a university. And we are working on the policies to end the school-to-prison pipeline. DHF is also working to educate and empower Central Valley families that stand on the front lines of energy transition. Right now, fossil fuel companies are reaping record-breaking profits while also receiving billions of dollars to pursue questionable and dangerous carbon sequestration projects. We are seeing a massive proliferation of these projects in the Central Valley. These directly impact farm worker families in their homes, their neighborhoods, and schools. And without substantial intervention, the destructive influence of these powerful industries on the local and regional environmental policies will further disadvantage the most vulnerable populations, laying the foundation for the next 100 plus years of environmental racism and prevent us from successfully addressing the climate crisis. The transition from fossil fuels to green energy has to be accomplished, providing sustainable living wages for workers that will inevitably lose their jobs. We celebrate the successes that we have secured, such as universal meals and increased health coverage access. And we are proud to partner with local agencies that provide regular food bank distributions. We're hard-pressed to connect people to the resources that they need, such as rental and financial assistance. The funding is inconsistent, undependable, and exclusionary to immigrant families. We need passage of food for all. Residents of the Central Valley are experiencing inequality of resources. Philanthropy dollars are nil compared to the rest of the state. We need to invest more state resources to the Central Valley and combat the legacy of institutionalized racism and classism in our society. We know this is possible. That's why we are all here. We can and we will do this. California will be stronger for it. Si se puede, it can be done. Now I have the pleasure of introducing the president of the Dolores Huerta Foundation, my mother, who coined the term Si se puede. For those that don't know, she started lobbying here in Sacramento in the 1950s. She was only one of 2 female lobbyists. At that time, women had to wear skirts or dresses to enter the Capitol. So when it comes to knowing what's possible, to seeing the progress that this state has made over the last 50 years, we can thank her for many of our advancements. Dolores Huerta.
Well, Camila, thank you very much for that kind introduction. And thank all of you for giving me a couple of moments to address the group here. And I do want to commend all of the organizations that are part of End Child Poverty for your commitment, your relentless dedication to this cause. And we know that if we keep working at it, we will make it happen. And as Camila mentioned before, you know, when we think of all of the wealth that we have in California, you know, the 4th largest economy in the world, when we think of all of the wealth that we have in the Central Valley with the production of oil and agriculture, and I'm going to throw in the prison system also, which provides a lot of employment. And yet that our educational statistics are so terrible, and it seems like we still are in the stage where farm worker families and all of the people that really contribute to create the wealth are not receiving, you know, they're not receiving the benefits of the wealth that they create. So here we are in the state legislature here, the capital of California, and we know that we have so many great legislators here that really care about the people of the state of California. But oftentimes, what needs to happen here, so much of it does depend on politics, on where people are getting their resources to be able to run for office, to get elected, and that kind of gets in the way. And some of the legislators here who are very bold, and they're saying, yes, the money is here. The money is here in the state, but it is not coming to the communities that need it, okay? And the people that should be providing the resources for these families that are producing the wealth, you know, somehow they are hesitant to be able to tax the people that are making the profits, to make sure that the profits are dribbled down to the people that need it. So I think my message to all of you here is that we have a lot of work to do. And it is not just enough to serve people and to provide them, you know, the resources that we have that we can, you know, we can make accessible to them. But we are going to have to do a big advocacy effort here, because there are some proposals here. One of them is a very bold proposal, is that we tax the assets of the millionaires and the billionaires in the state of California, all right? But that is not going to happen unless all of us work very, very hard, and we go to all of the legislators throughout the state of California, and we do the work in their constituent areas to say to the people out there, you have got to be part of this mission to end the child poverty in the state of California. You know, we cannot continue to brag about what a great state we are and that we're the ones that we set the policies for the whole nation, because what we do in California, we know it goes east, right? But so we have good people here in the state assembly and the state senate and in our governor. But we know that they get the pressures from the very wealthy and the people that want to, they don't want to share the wealth. So we're going to have to say to all of our legislators out there in every single district of the state of California, we need your help. We need to bring the money back to the people that create the wealth, but it's not going to happen unless you stand up very, very strong. So I think my question to all of you is, are you willing to do the work? Are you willing to do the work? Okay, it's going to take all of us working together, and I know that we kind of talked about this a couple of years ago, and we're still working on it, but we can make it happen. Si se puede. Thank you.
I got to say, I'm slightly starstruck following Dolores Huerta at a podium. It's the honor of a lifetime, but I think we are really all ready to do the work. Before we wrap, we're going to have about 8 different groups of advocates address this crowd here to talk about more specific policy issues. We're going to start with a focus on early care and education, and I'm really pleased to introduce Maritza De Leon of Parent Voices and Josefina Ramirez Notzina from Children Now. Apologies. Thank you.
Buenas tardes para todos. Mi nombre es Maritza. Soy una líder con Parent Voice en Marín. Vivo con mi esposo y mis 4 niños. Tengo 2 niños y 2 niñas. Estoy muy agradecida con la ayuda que he recibido con el cuidado de niños por mis hijos. Con mis niños he podido trabajar, he podido sacar a mi familia adelante, pero cuando no tenemos cuidado de niños sufrimos bastante. Cuando nació mi hija, la metí en la lista de espera. Iba cada semana a la oficina para preguntar si había espacio y siempre me decían de que no había. Me sentía desesperada, tenía 3 diferentes personas que cuidaban a mi hija. Una persona la cuidaba los lunes, otra los martes y una tercera persona los miércoles, jueves y viernes. Había días que no tenía quien me la cuidara, porque solo podía contar con ellas de vez en cuando. Me cobraban $50 diarios. No podía ir a trabajar, nadie me la cuidaba, no podía concentrarme en mi trabajo porque siempre estaba preocupada por mi hija. Cuando mi hija cumplió 1 año, me dieron el cuidado de Head Start. Fue una alegría que para mí es inexplicable lo que yo pude sentir en ese momento. Sabía que mi hija al fin iba a estar en un solo lugar con las mismas personas cuidándola, pero Head Start solo fue nada más hasta que ella tenía 3 años y seguía en la lista de espera. Cuando el tercer cumpleaños se acercaba, fui a la oficina y cada vez que iba le pedía a Dios que me ayudara a que me dieran el cuidado. No podía dormir en las noches, me levantaba preocupada, la desesperación de saber que mi hija no iba a tener cuidado. Por fin me dieron el cuidado del programa de pago alternativo. Fue un día sensacional porque ya estoy recibiendo el programa del pago alternativo. Cuando tenía mis próximos niños, los agregaron a mi caso y no tenía que esperar tanto tiempo para tener cuidado. Estoy muy agradecida que tengo cuidado para mi hija de 3 y mi bebé de 10 meses. Estoy muy agradecida de tener esta ayuda. También me he beneficiado de la congelación de pago familiar que cobran a las familias por cuidado de niño, pero si el gobierno no toma ninguna acción, este año vamos a tener que empezar a pagar $294 cada mes. Serían $3,500 en el año. Eso sería un impacto grande en mi familia porque no tenemos lo suficiente para pagarlo. La verdad, no tengo ni idea sobre cómo vamos a pagarla. Todo está subiendo, la comida está subiendo, los pañales están subiendo, la gasolina está subiendo, la renta está subiendo, otro bill de casi de 300 al mes sería demasiado para nosotros. Me gustaría que cada familia que está en la lista de espera tuviera la oportunidad de sentir como yo me sentí cuando me dieron cuidado de niños. De esa manera podemos ir a nuestros trabajos con la confianza de que nuestros hijos están seguros y están aprendiendo. Y también pienso que cada familia en California tenga acceso a cuidado de niño accesible, no un cuidado que te cobren casi 300 al mes. Eso no es económico. Por eso vengo aquí para decirles la gran ayuda de tener cuidado de niños, ya que ha ayudado bastante a mi familia, y a pedirles que le sigamos invirtiendo en ese programa. Muchas gracias.
Gracias, Maritza, y todos los padres que son parte de Parent Voices. Josefina Ramirez Natsana, Director Early Childhood at Children Now. Excited to be standing alongside Parent Voices and other orgs here to talk about rate reform. In late December, we delivered a letter to Governor Newsom, administration leaders, and the entire legislature with 746 signatories, many of the groups in this room, urging the state to please fix our child care system by addressing rates and supporting mixed delivery. We need a critical investment in our early care and education system to prevent closure of child care and education programs. Child care programs that are primarily owned by women of color, primarily run by women of color, used by our working families that need child care in order to go to work. So we want to help stem the exodus of early childhood professionals and ensure that care meets the needs of all families. Families, children, and early care and education providers, predominantly women and children of color, will be further marginalized unless we make significant investments in our early care and education system in our budget this year. We ask the legislature to adopt child care reimbursement rate reforms, an increase of the 2021 regional market rate for immediate relief to providers, adopt a cost-based model, including a timeline for implementation for the full cost of care based on program enrollment without charging family fees. We ask that the state invest in California's early care and education providers to ensure that all children, specifically 4-year-old children and families, have equitable access to a variety of care and education options that meet their needs. There's strong unified support among our early learning and child care partners, including Parent Voices, the Child Care Resource Center, the members of the Early Care and Education Coalition, and we will continue to fight for child care reform until every child has the opportunities they need to thrive. Thank you all.
Big thanks to Maritza and Josefina for speaking so powerfully about the work that their organizations are doing. We're going to talk about the labor movement next. As we all know, the work that labor does is so central to bringing people out of poverty into the middle class. So I'm really pleased to introduce a longtime partner, Tiffany Whiten of the California State Council of SEIU. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share with you all today. I am Tiffany Whiten, Senior Government Relations Advocate for SEIU California, representing over 700,000 workers across the state. Our priorities may change year after year, but some of them remain a central part of our work. A priority that will always remain is creating unions for all. Unions build power for workers and their families and should be done so regardless of their documented status. We will continue to push to achieve economic justice in our communities, as we know that good union jobs have a career track and can help workers and their families. For Black and brown workers in particular, unions can play an important role in creating greater fairness and opportunities, reducing discrimination, and opening a path to economic stability, prosperity, and retirement security. Historically, union jobs have been a way to lift workers and their families into the middle class. So not only this year, but every year, we will unapologetically continue to strive for unions for all. This year and in the last decade, we have focused a priority around childcare. Family childcare providers are predominantly women of color and small business owners. Currently, there is a lack of access to affordable childcare, which keeps women out of the workforce. In the past 10 years, we have seen nearly half the workforce leave, with one of the leading factors being not having access to childcare. Family childcare providers are especially important to our economy because they provide service at non-traditional hours and to the communities most in need. Family providers care for 0 to 4 and oftentimes will care for their siblings after school. Childcare will remain a priority as the crisis is not only for access to childcare, but also for childcare workers, which is why investments in the workforce, wages, and expanding slots are so crucial. Another central priority for us will continue to be our fight for fast food workers. Some of you may recall AB 257 from last year. 80% are people of color, 60% are Latino and Latina, and 2/3 are women. The fast food industry is one of the largest fastest growing industries in California. Historically, fast food industry workers have been subject to low wages and unsafe workplace conditions. Our fight for fast food workers will continue this year through the referendum process, as corporations have actively and financially fought and continue to fight against our efforts to lift workers and their families out of low wage paying jobs and throwing millions, I repeat, millions of dollars around to hurt instead of support workers and the power of their voice. This year, we will also be prioritizing the establishment of a $25 an hour for minimum wage for the healthcare sector, including hospitals, nursing homes, clinics, dialysis, and medical offices. Our healthcare workers are leaving the profession because the pay is too low and the job is demanding both physically and mentally. The majority of healthcare workers are women and people of color. Nursing home workers are a good example of the type of workers we are trying to lift up and ensure a living wage. While healthcare workers endure the emotional and physical burden of their jobs, which we all saw during the pandemic, the executive and management continue to make huge amounts of money. For example, CEO of Providence, one of the largest hospital chains in the country, made $10 million last year. Healthcare providers deserve better so they can care for their patients when the patients need it the most. Lastly, we will continue to fight for good union public sector jobs like those in the counties that provide essential services to our communities, such as CalWorks, CalFresh, and Child Welfare Services. To name a few, an ongoing threat has been contracting out in the public sector, so we will continue to fight these attacks. Contracting out puts workers at risk, and what we have learned from previous budget deficits, these causes workers to start relying on the very services that they are providing to our communities. So while this is only a handful of our priorities, we will continue to push to uplift workers and their families. I sincerely thank you for your time today.
Thanks so much, Tiffany. We're going to next transition to talking about healthcare and a whole child approach. So I'm really pleased to introduce Myra Alvarez from the Children's Partnership.
Good afternoon, everybody. Buenas tardes. My name is Myra Alvarez, and I'm the president of the Children's Partnership, a statewide advocacy organization focused on advancing child health equity. Today, we are grateful and proud to join our partners and work together to call for solutions that lift children and families out of poverty, families hardest hit by the pandemic. To imagine a better future is to advance solutions that support a child's safety, health, well-being, ensuring a whole child and whole family approach, a commitment to make public programs actually work for the public, to coordinate services and ensure a no wrong door to accessing the services and supports they need. It's like Maritza said, a mother doesn't get to choose to feed her child one day and pay for rent the next, or take her child to the doctor one day and take her to the child care center the next. Families do not live single-issue lives, so neither does our advocacy for them. And as we work together to demand better from our public services, we cannot overlook the essential role that health insurance coverage and access to care plays in the lives of our families, especially during a public health crisis. We're currently operating under a public health emergency that put in place a number of flexibilities to allow communities to be supported and protected. One of those was to protect families' Medi-Cal coverage, allowing them to stay enrolled without having to annually requalify or prove their eligibility during this challenging time. Californians enrolled in the program were given the same simplified process that those of us privileged enough to work with employer-sponsored coverage have. We avoid the paperwork of annually renewing, and in doing so, it made Medi-Cal that much more equitable. What we know today is that those coverage protections are going to end on March 31st, and families are going to have to jump through those administrative hoops again and put millions of families at risk of losing their coverage. Our own Department of Healthcare Services estimates that up to 2 million Californians will lose coverage over the next year, including thousands of our kids. The progress that our state has made to ensure 94% of Californians and up to 97% of our kids is going to be stalled, and it will happen unnecessarily. The federal government predicts that most of those people that are going to lose coverage, they're going to still be eligible, but they'll get tripped up on procedural snags, like not getting their renewal paperwork to the right address. And as too often happens, those hardest hit will be families of color that disproportionately rely on Medi-Cal for coverage. It's the primary source of coverage for Latinx and Black children. Of the over 5 million kids in Medi-Cal, 72% of them are children of color. Gaps in coverage mean disruptions in children's health care. So many will miss out on the preventive and primary care services that we know are so important for our young kids when 90% of their brain development occurs. It's why during this emergency period, we told families you don't need to redetermine your eligibility. We know that those disruptions are going to be detrimental to the well-being of our families. One example of the many comes to us from Alameda County. In early 2022, a 20-month-old was referred to a regional center to be assessed for autism. When the mother tried to access care at this crucial point of intervention, she learned that her child's Medicare coverage had been terminated, and the center could not serve her until her insurance was reinstated. As too often happens, that coverage was wrongfully terminated. The parent shared that the application process was confusing and that she had questions about immigration. One of those was not going to help her because she was losing the coverage that her child needed to actually get those services. She reapplied for that coverage, but it didn't get reinstated until 6 months later. That meant that her care was delayed, resulting in precious time lost for possible early intervention. As a relatively new mom myself, I've been to the doctor more time in these 18 months of my little girl's life than I have in the last 10 years of my own. No parent should have to worry, and yet too many do, because of the faulty systems that our families are subject to, risking their child's development. Last year, our legislature and governor made multi-year continuous coverage possible that allowed kids to stay in Medi-Cal for the first 5 years of their life. We're asking that we implement that policy sooner than the 2025 that the administration is proposing. We urge the legislature to work with the administration to implement this policy as soon as possible, to protect families' Medi-Cal coverage and allow them to stay enrolled. There's no time to waste. And right now, we know that people losing coverage is unnecessary. We can educate, we can build awareness and ensure people know that now is the time to renew your Medi-Cal coverage. Make sure your county office knows your updated address. Make sure you're aware of how important it is to have that Medi-Cal coverage. 15 million of us depend on Medi-Cal, including more than half of all of our kids. We can all get this message out, and we look forward to working with you to make it happen. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Myra. We're next going to transition to discuss the hunger cliff and anti-hunger policies. So I'd like to bring up Itzel Gutierrez from the California Association of Food Banks and Joel Campos from the Second Harvest Food Bank of Santa Cruz County. Thank you both.
Thank you so much for this opportunity to talk to you all about hunger and solutions, and thanks to End Child Poverty California and EPIC for today. At the California Association of Food Banks, we represent 41 member food banks across the state. And I wanted to let you know that we are currently facing a critical issue that threatens the well-being of millions of Californians, the pending hunger cliff. Since April 2020, all CalFresh recipients have been receiving emergency allotments, which has brought all household sizes up at least the maximum benefit amount of their household size. In December, the federal omnibus spending bill was passed, which ends emergency allotments in February nationally. This will mean a reduction of food assistance statewide by $500 million a month for 5 million people who are on CalFresh. Some people will go from receiving $281 to just $23 a month. This will cause a massive hunger and hardship, and if we don't take action to mitigate harm for millions of families and seniors who will lose access to crucial food assistance. The hunger cliff is not just a hypothetical scenario. It is a very real threat that will have devastating consequences for families who rely on CalFresh to put food on the table. Families will be forced to choose between paying for rent, utilities, or medication, and buying groceries. Children will go to bed hungry, and seniors will have to choose between eating and paying for their prescriptions. But the hunger cliff is not just a problem for those who rely on CalFresh. It also will have ripple effects throughout our economy. When families can't afford to buy groceries, local grocery stores and supermarkets will lose business, and farmers and other food producers will see decline in demand. For every $5 in CalFresh generates as much as $9 in total economic activity. So what can we do to prevent the hunger cliff? 1, we need to extend the emergency allotments for 5 additional months using state dollars to mitigate the sudden dramatic benefit cliff to give people time to prepare for. And 2, we need to increase the minimum to $50 so that no one in California is receiving less than $50 in CalFresh benefits. Other critical anti-hunger priorities this year include Food for All, allowing all age groups, regardless of immigration status, to get CalFresh. And as people turn to food banks when the CalFresh emergency allotments ends, bolstering food banks in both terms of Cal food dollars so they can use to purchase food. And we are looking forward to working alongside Senator Skinner to keep building on School Meals for All to ensure that all children have adequate access to school meals throughout the year. And now I'll turn it to my colleague Joel to share his story on hunger.
Thank you, Ixo. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for giving me the time to be here. I really appreciate it. My family was on CalFresh food stamps back in the days when I was a teenager. I was also participating in the free lunch program. I'm grateful and thank you for the program at that time, but primarily not to the program itself because it was very, very hard to navigate, obviously, but to my mom. My mom was a very tenacious woman. She would just go to the office, fill out a bunch of paperwork that she didn't understand. Her primary language is Spanish, obviously. I would have to go with her to go and help her fill out the 20 pages application, not just for CalFresh or food stamps, but also for the free meal at school. Thankfully, the program has advanced a lot over the last 25, 30 years. And also, thankfully, we have the free lunch for all summer, free lunches for everybody in schools, which is very, very good for all the families back in my district, back in Santa Cruz County, but all across the state, obviously. Growing up, I remember going to the store. The first 2 weeks were very good, full of food. We'll go and just fill out the basket, the shopping cart with food. That was not the same after 2 weeks later. Obviously, we'll start going back to the routine of just the basics: beans, rice, beans and rice. So it was tough, but we never really complained as teenagers. We just thought it was part of the cycle. But thankfully, my parents did go and access the food banks, the food bank in Santa Cruz County at that time, and they would come back with food, vegetables, fruits, which were very good. We love them. So, food banks are very critical at this time. And with this hunger cliff that is coming down, people losing $200, another speaker earlier said, yeah, $50, $280 might seem like not much, but for a family who is struggling to put food on their tables, $80, $50 means the world. It makes a huge difference in their budget and in their lives. If families lose these benefits, they will turn even more to food banks, make it even harder for food banks to really accommodate the need or meet the need of everybody else who is going to be needing these benefits. So in Santa Cruz County alone, there is 75,000 people that we serve, the Second Harvest Food Bank Santa Cruz County serves. This is a county where there is 260,000 people or so. So imagine that. There is 1 out of 3 people or kids and residents of the county are going hungry every day. Thank you for the time. Appreciate it.
Big thank you to Itzul and Joel. We're going to talk next about Safety Net for All, an issue that I know many of us are working on. So very pleased to bring up Alexis Castro from the California Immigrant Policy Center.
Hello, everybody. Good morning. Buenos días a todos. My name is Alexis Castro, and I'm the Government Affairs Director with the California Immigrant Policy Center. So first and foremost, just wanted to thank the previous speakers. CIPC is a proud co-sponsor of Food for All, and so wanted to make sure that we put that plug in. But I'm here to talk to you all today about an important issue, unemployment benefits. CIPC is a proud member of the Safety Net for All Coalition, which has been working since 2020 to win unemployment benefits for Californian workers who are excluded from unemployment insurance due to their immigration status. The purpose and only condition of the California Unemployment Insurance Program is to help workers when they are temporarily laid off, and so that they are available when their employer calls them back to work. But as California is reeling from crisis after crisis, from COVID-19 to wildfires and now historic rainstorms and flooding, over 1 million Californians are excluded from unemployment benefits when they are temporarily out of work. Further, employers' taxes on the labor of undocumented workers contribute an estimated $485 million each year to our unemployment insurance system, even though those same workers never see a cent of those benefits. This disparity hurts employers as well as workers. That money is supposed to help sustain industries and help workers get back to work when jobs become available. And without unemployment benefits, our economy suffers. Missed paychecks spiral into missed rents, missed car payments, and they spiral into the inability to provide food for our families. One of our coalition members, Rosa, recently told her story about how her and her husband work as farm workers in the Central Valley, and they need the income of 2 people to be able to cover their basic expenses. When the rain hit and the fields flooded, her husband's employers told the staff that there was no work and that he should file for unemployment benefits. This was impossible for Rosa's husband, and now they have to choose between paying rent and putting food on the table. And so these are the types of injustices that SB 227, the Safety Net for All Workers Act, authored by Senator Durazo, is seeking to address. SB 227 would create an excluded workers program to be administered by the state's Employment Development Department. It would provide workers who are excluded from unemployment insurance solely due to their immigration status with $300 per week for each week they are unemployed, up to 20 weeks. This is in line with what excluded workers on average would receive if they were eligible for unemployment insurance. This bill is modeled off of similar proving successful programs in other states, and it is informed by the coalition's worker leaders and their unique expertise based on their lived experience. In New York, which has implemented the most extensive excluded worker program to date, 66% of that money was used to pay back rent, over a third was used to buy food, and over 20% was used to apply for an ITIN. California cannot continue to rely on piecemeal relief for undocumented Californians in times of crisis. When we say we want a California for all, we mean regardless of faith, regardless of skin color, regardless of gender, and regardless of immigration status. And so that's why we're advocating for SB 227, the Safety Net for All Workers Act, and requesting $356 million to create the state's first ever excluded worker program. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexis. Next, we're going to discuss tax credit equity. How do we get more money into the pockets of the families and individuals in our state who need it the most? And with that, I'll introduce Monica Lazo from Golden State Opportunity and Mandy Nand from United Ways of California. Thanks both.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mandy Nand, and I'm the Economic Mobility Program Manager with United Ways of California. Last year, our partners helped file almost 77,000 tax returns, helping people save $27 million in paid preparer fees. That's $27 million back in people's pockets and in our communities. According to our Real Cost Measure report, 1 in 3 families struggle to meet a basic standard of living. Of these families, 97% of them have at least one working adult. What this means is just because you have job security, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have economic security. Tax credits like the Cali ITC and the Young Child Tax Credit play an important role in helping families close that financial gap. These investments are especially important for community members with ITIN numbers, as California is one of the few states that provide tax credits for people with an ITIN. California is leading the way, but there's more that we could do at the state level by expanding tax credits. Right now, 79% of filers get less than $200 from the Cali ITC. And though families can get up to $1,083 with the Young Child Tax Credit, it is only available to children who are under the age of 6, leaving behind a large number of families with older children. Each year, we see firsthand how tax credits change the lives of families for the better, and it shows us that for a small investment, the state can make a big impact in low-income working families' lives. This includes Cindy Cortez, a single mom of 3 girls living in Sonoma County who bounced from shelter to shelter with her children. She'd hoped to be here today, but she sent me a letter that I'll read to you next. Before going to United Way, I was paying about $150 to get my taxes done by a paid preparer. $150 may not sound like a lot, but for me, it meant that I was giving away a portion of my refund, money that could go towards me and my daughters. Though I was working full-time as a medical receptionist, I was thousands of dollars in debt from a dental procedure and living in a shelter with my 3 children. Getting my taxes done through a VitaSite was a completely different experience from going to a paid preparer. You talk with them and communicate with them, build friendships and community. They go above and beyond to make sure that I'm able to get every tax credit and every tax write-off that I earned. After I got my taxes done by United Way, I ended up with a refund of nearly $14,000. I was able to use this money to get an apartment for me and my children, pay off my debt, and get braces for my daughters. My experience and my refund helped change our life. I now have stable housing and a community who cares about me and supports me. The whole Vita experience brought so much comfort to me and my family, and I know it can do the same for others. I find Cindy's story so relatable because she's one of the many Californians struggling to find stability. This is why we want to ensure that people like Cindy can benefit by expanding the Young Child Tax Credit eligibility and creating a Cali ITC minimum of $300. Next, I'll pass it over to our partner, Monica.
Good afternoon. My name is Monica Lazo, and I'm the Policy Manager for Golden State Opportunity. Along with United Ways of California and more than 30 other organizations across California, we are part of the Cali ITC Coalition, a group of advocates dedicated to expanding the Cali ITC and other tax credits to better benefit all low-income households. Mandy did a great job of explaining why tax credits and free tax preparation services are vital to families across our state. Now I'm here to tell you that the California legislature can and must do more. We're calling on all of you to raise the Cali ITC minimum to at least $300 because the current minimum is far too low. Although some families can claim credits of up to $4,500, 75%, that's 4 out of 5 eligible filers, get less than $200. The current minimum is just $1. When people are living paycheck to paycheck, $300 goes a long way, especially for ITIN filers who are not eligible for unemployment benefits and the federal EITC. California needs to make filing taxes worth the time, the energy, and oftentimes the cost. Raising the minimum amount to $300 will encourage more families to claim their money. We are also calling on you to extend the Young Child Tax Credit to all Cali ITC eligible families. Senator Rubio has done amazing work when it comes to the YCTC. Just last year, we got an amazing win that was included in the governor's budget for families with zero income. However, more still needs to be done. 62% of Cali ITC eligible families are excluded from the YCTC once the child turns 6. We know that the cost of raising a child does not stop at 6. So why should our support? Californians are often told by legislators that you work for us. So now we are here to tell you that we need your help, and if you're here to uplift families and children out of poverty, raise the Cali ITC minimum to $300 and extend the Young Child Tax Credit. Thank you.
Monica and Mandy, thank you both so much. We're going to transition to access to justice, so I will introduce Christopher Sanchez from the Western Center on Law and Poverty. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'll keep my comments brief. Thank you for being here. My name is Christopher Sanchez, and I'm a policy advocate with the Western Center on Law and Poverty. At the Western Center on Law and Poverty, we talk about access to justice. And for us, we're referring to ensuring Californians are able to access any judicial system, any system that may be similar to the judicial system, such as an administrative hearing or so forth. And some of those would also be systems such as the child welfare system and other systems such as Child Protective Services. See, those systems make critical decisions for families, and sometimes they're life-changing events. And sometimes, unfortunately, they'll lead to criminal proceedings. That's why many decisions that the child welfare system has resulted in family separation. And in many cases, that has resulted families experiencing, that has been because families are experiencing poverty. We've said, as Californians, we should never separate families. We said that very loud and clear when families were being separated at the border, and we're going to say it very loud and clear this year in the legislature. We want the legislature to ask themselves, how can we improve a system to ensure that we're family focused, to ensure that families are at the center, to be whole at all times, that they should never be separated for anything, especially if they're only experiencing poverty, and that's the only reason why you're separating them. So we're going to have difficult conversations with members of the legislature, with our partners that we work with often, but these are needed conversations. There's no reason to continue, for these systems to continue to criminalize those that are in poverty. The last thing I'll say is that Western Center stands with everyone who has presented today and all the other issues that are centering families for the conversations this year. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Christopher. And last but certainly not least, we're going to be discussing reimagining CalWORK. So Andrew Shane from Grace is the last one who's going to be speaking. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for staying. Thank you for being with us today. Obviously, we're at time, but for those of you who see this information in the legislative packets, we hope you're able to uplift that we really see an opportunity in this cycle, thanks to the great work that's been done by the legislature, by advocate stakeholders, in partnership with the department, with the counties, to really look directly at the racist, sexist roots of the CalWORKs policies, the program, that was handed to us by the federal authorizers led by Newt Gingrich and by Pete Wilson. And to finally reimagine the program so that it's working for families. We're going to reorient it for those on the front lines who are administering it so that there is streamlined access to services. We limit sanctions wherever possible so that families have the cash assistance and they have the services and the supports, and there's the direction from the state down to our counties and our workers to have alignment that this is going to be the goal of the program going forward. This rests on many years of partnership between those stakeholders, and we're really grateful for that. But we think that this is something that we can really make impactful progress on this year, and invite your support for that. Along with that, this was mentioned earlier by Senator Skinner, that there is still work to do to raise the grants, that there are still households that are living in deep child poverty, depending on the assistance unit. If someone is, if an adult member is sanctioned or is not able to be on aid because of their immigration status or receipt of SSI, there are still some households that are below that threshold. And obviously, we envision to go far beyond that. But 50% of the federal poverty level is unacceptable, and appreciate your support in trying to end deep child poverty for all. Thank you.